Well,
Are you
here we
waiting for
are.
me again?
No, I'm not. I'm starting right in.
Good.
You should be grateful. We're reading Filling the Void, chapter 9, and this is a good one because we just came off of Angela meeting her birth mother, and it was a horrible experience
It
and
was not a good
rejection.
experience. And
And
then
now,
she started, I related to this intellectualizing
mm,
her,
yep.
the rejection, right? Well, she quelled the hurt of being rejected by Deborah in the same way she did anytime life felt too chaotic, music and intellectualization. She obsessed over one song and
Mm,
explained away her emotions through academic research. I totally related to that with
I did.
listening to music in the
Yep.
car when I was like, I had my
Yep.
little earbuds around, walking around listening to music,
Yeah.
escaping from the world. Very
I know.
relatable.
I was thinking of my Elton John years, just laying in my room listening, like Elton John, like he's talking to me. And I was thinking about her because she has this one beat and she liked the beat. And it's just a steady beat and it grounded her. So she always,
Hmm.
even to her adult years, she listened to it.
Yeah, and
She,
she went on, she got
mm-hmm,
older, and started listening to Pachelbel's Canon. She went
mm-hmm,
from the Goo Goo Dolls to
mm-hmm.
Pachelbel's Canon. Um, yeah, it just, the repetition kept her grounded and
This is good for people to hear, like if you're raising an adopted child, because she says the total lack of dissonance soothed me, creating a perfect world void of hard realities of my life, a soundtrack perfectly fitting my ghost kingdom, which
hmm
2 minutes of total ease and complete resonance to the difference from what I experienced outside of my headphones. So it's like she seemed like this overachiever, wonderful girl out in the world that everyone loves, and she's doing great in sports, but she had chaos in her
Yeah.
mind. That's what I think people don't get about the adoption process, but they're happy. That.
Yeah. Oh, I know someone adopted and they're
Mm-hmm.
totally fine. I mean, yes, this is why these stories are important. These books are
Yeah,
important. We're not fine.
we're
Uh,
not fine. I'm giving a shout out to our friend. We have a mutual friend that introduced Sarah and I named Karen. She has a friend, Christy, who is not adopted, who I guess finds this fascinating and listens to it all the time and tells people about it, like wants to understand because she's like, people need to know this. I think this is kind of the stuff we're talking about because it's very hard to explain to people.
hmm
And
You
it,
have to really
yes,
hear and listen. We had an email from a
yes,
genealogist. She's like, I'm not
oh,
adopted. Don't have, like her great grandmother was adopted.
yeah.
And at 12 years old, and they changed her name.
Oh, gosh.
At 12 years old.
That
Anyway,
happened to our guest, one of our guests. Yeah.
it just, the genealogist who says, I just think what you're doing is so important. And I've told other genealogists so
Yeah.
that they're aware. And I mean, little by little, this message is getting out there.
And it's not because people don't love their parents or have some people are very in love with their families. Angela, who wrote this book, loves her parents. It's not you can have both handling at the same time. You can have a great home life, wonderful parents, and still feel all this stuff. Because
Hmm.
it's not just angry adoptees. I think that's the,
Right.
you know,
And then she really does get into one of the ways in which she was able to deal with this rejection was, again, the intellectualization of it
yeah,
and how talking about how Black people have been historically, their
right.
babies,
Yeah.
this was racial,
Yes.
taking kids from their parents and putting
Yeah.
them with white savior parents. She just wasn't ready to face the emotions yet, so she
Mm-mm.
dove into research. But ever since the social worker's statement about transracial adoption being akin to racial genocide,
Yeah.
Black families were under attack on numerous facets of their daily life. It was the beginning of mass incarceration. This was the 70s.
Yeah.
Mass incarceration, which disproportionately impacted Black Americans, and the beginning of a national recession that hit Black men the hardest. Child Protective Services started to remove children of color from their homes at a higher rate than they removed white children.
Yeah.
Deborah would have been in her late 20s and early 30s in this decade,
Yeah.
Deborah being her parent.
It's big. I mean, this is when that documentary 13 is about the start of like it's really like, horrific
Hmm.
how disproportionate it is in all fronts.
Yeah.
And she does delve into that. Like her friends were like, sorry you were rejected. And she's like, no, it's about like she had to intellectualize it for her emotions because
It's
all these
the
it's
rejection is
painful.
devastating. And adoptees go through that when they try to
Yeah.
find their first families. Often,
Yeah.
sometimes, I'm
Yeah.
not going to say, I don't know the exact percentages, but
No.
sometimes they get rejected. And then
Mm.
that's a secondary rejection
Yeah.
that is,
And that you can't intellectualize away. It's so in your core. Like, why wouldn't my parent want to meet me or know me?
there
They have their own trauma, obviously, but
this terrible story, and I remember this in the
mm,
news,
me too.
about Tammy, a young Black mother of three, is a tragic example of the truth behind this assertion
Hmm.
about transracial adoptions. In 2003, Tammy and her two children lived with her grandparents on a fixed income. She was often forced to choose between taking her kids to their doctor's appointments and working a shift to make enough money for food. When one child's ant bite turned into a staph infection and her other child's upper respiratory infection turned into pneumonia, Child Protective Services moved in, charging Tammy with medical neglect and placing her kids in a foster home.
Yep.
Those
Like,
kids were the same ones
yep.
um, that whose foster parents in a murder suicide drove the SUV off a California cliff.
And they realized they were being abused and neglected
Mm-hmm.
the whole
Abused
time.
and neglected. Yeah.
It's
I mean, just I remember that really well.
Yeah, and she says this extreme nature of Tammy's children is the rare side, but it paints a clear picture of the child welfare system that assumes Black children must be saved from the social ills of their culture, which is quick to believe the glossy social media posts that depict wokeness. And
Hmm.
we have to be very careful in this. I'm so glad we're reading this, to be honest.
Well, and also, yes, it's a rare example. However, Moses
It's
Farrow is out
Yep,
there with the good fight,
yeah.
citing the murders of adopted children
Just
all
this
over the
weekend in
place.
California, another one.
Hmm. Yeah.
Just this weekend. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And we know
So,
many reasons why. Yeah.
yes.
Well,
Well, then she got into
oh, I like
one
this
of
one.
her
Ants.
adoptee, the Nancy from the
Hmm.
her mentoring, who, I'm not one of those adoptees who's traumatized, and um,
Nancy's white, right? She's a white woman and she's very like, isn't she? She has,
Nancy's one of the kids, one of her adoptees in the mentoring.
oh, in the mentoring, yeah. And she ties her hair pink, right?
Right, pink
Yep.
strings in her blonde hair.
Yeah.
But she Angela says, that she did hear that underlying yearning
Yeah.
that adoptees feel, um,
Well, it's the proving yourself. Like, I'm this and I'm this and I'm this. Like, you have to
working
have
hard to achieve
accomplishments.
and
Yes.
be worthy of it. It's
Yeah.
and then but she also jumps back to the couple from the previous chapter, the
Yeah.
Mitchells, who, met with Heather and the baby and everything,
Yeah.
and the Heather, when she'd said, "Can I hold my baby before they
Yeah.
take her?" And
Yeah.
the Mitchells were curious about blank slate theory. They said after adopting Heather's baby, they emailed saying, "We read that babies can feel connected to their biological mother, even if they were transitioned to their new family immediately after being born. Do you believe this?"
Yeah.
And again, this isn't that long ago.
It's not
How
that long ago.
how is it that people still buy into some blank slate?
Yeah. And she told her about the primal wound and she said, listen,
Hmm.
it's controversial, but this is true. I mean,
Yeah.
people don't people don't want to know too when they're going into it. And maybe they wrote her. I was thinking about the Mitchells because why would they be writing her? Maybe they're not having that connection. It's an interesting she also went back to Nancy and kind of told her she didn't want to say like, well, are you sure you don't want to put your feelings on someone else, right? But she kind of told her like at a younger age, like, do you think that this would affect you or whatever? And Nancy was even like, oh, wait a second. I do have all of this because sometimes you don't even know that all the things you're doing are with others. And so she started listening to others and saying, I do
Hmm.
have that. I do have that. Just like our adoptee groups, just
Yeah.
like our podcast. I mean,
And then, Nancy's birth mother rejected her. And then
Yeah.
she had, kept in an inbox a response. And then which made Angela kind of wonder, yes, I connected to my mother's voice, to the food she ate.
Yeah.
I got to know her, but maybe she ignored that. Maybe her mother ignored those feelings, and that considered her just a side effect of sex. Who knows?
I don't know that we'll know.
Painful, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, now
And
she's
she says,
this
what's
is
next? So now we're
what's
getting
next.
into survivor's guilt, chapter
Survivor's
10,
guilt. Oh gosh. Well,
right? That's going to be
wondering what
interesting. I
that's
know.
going to be.
I know. And
Yes.
I love the stuff she brings up because these concepts we've read a lot. We've been doing this for several years. And she brings up things I have not pinpointed, like survivor's guilt. Just even that
Survivor's
statement, I'm like,
guilt.
we talked about that on our adoptee cafe, that we're
Hmm.
survivors.
We are survivors of adoption. That's what
Yeah.
somebody said. And
Yeah.
she's like, well, I refuse to call myself an adoptee. I'm a survivor of adoption.
Yeah.
This is a trauma,
Yeah.
and I survived the trauma. Here I
Yeah.
am. And given the statistics, many adoptees don't survive either from self-harm or
No.
at the hands of the people who adopted them or, siblings in the household, whatever it may be. So,
Yeah. And just because you're alive doesn't mean you're surviving either, by the way.
yeah.
So I do think people that are doing, I mean, we are
Or
survivors
thriving
or
anyway.
thriving, right? Exactly.
Surviving, yes, maybe not thriving.
Right. Was that
Yeah.
Barb from Colorado? She was a new joiner. I think so.
Yes, yes,
I don't know
yes,
why I
that's
remembered
right.
that, but that was good. I'm going to think
Good
of that
recall.
now. Yeah. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
think of that.
Yeah.
Well, we have a great interview coming up.
Yep.
So
With Angela. So see you in a minute.
see you in a minute.